Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series that will air throughout the year in support of Cleveland Reads. Writers Unplugged is a chance to hear your favorite writers or new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on them in a coffee shop. Cleveland Reads is an initiative to improve literacy levels here in our community, and Mayor Bibb has challenged Clevelanders collectively to read 1 million books and or spend 10 million minutes reading. Collectively, we're almost at 6 million minutes. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian here at the main branch of Cleveland Public Library. And one of my favorite things besides reading is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know them, to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially getting to know them better and seeing them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. We are so lucky this evening to have Samantha M. Bailey with us. But before we get started, I want to mention a few quick housekeeping notes. To find out who else is visiting Writers Unplugged, both virtually and in person, visit clevelandreads.com/unplugged. And Max Beck's Books on Coventry, which is our fabulous independent bookstore, has copies of Samantha's books waiting for you. So you can visit them in person or go to maxbacks.com. So brief introduction to Samantha. Samantha M. Bailey is the USA Today and #1 nationally best-selling author of Woman on the Edge and the instant #1 national bestseller, Watch Out for Her. Her novels have sold in 11 countries to date. She's also a journalist and freelance editor. Her work has appeared in Now Magazine, The Village Post, The Thrill Begins, and The Crime Hub, among other publications. She lives in Toronto, where she can usually be found tapping away on her computer or curled up on her sofa with a book. So I attended BoucherCon in the fall of 2019, and BoucherCon is a conference for mystery writers and readers. I liken it to Disney World for readers or librarians who love mystery and thrillers. This is where I met Samantha. We were both watching a panel or listening to a panel with fellow writer Roz Ney, and who spent time with us earlier this summer. And instantly we bonded. At the conclusion of BoucherCon, we sat across from one another at an absolutely epic lunch. Writers, bookstagrammers, and me, the librarian. And you know, it's that kind of lunch where you were laughing so hard you were crying. It was a great way to end the weekend. And little did we know that a couple months later, the world as we knew it would be completely different. So it was a great memory to hold on to. And thanks to technology, Samantha and I keep in touch, and I've been honored to see her writing journey and watch her shine and develop new fans all the time. So please join me in a warm Writers Unplugged welcome to Samantha M. Bailey.
Hi, Jen.
Hey.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay.
It occurred to me, it's true that not to talk about the pandemic, but yeah, like right after we met and that hilarious lunch, everything changed.
Yeah, it was a lunch. There were like 20 of us seated at that table, and, you know, writers, bookstagrammers, absolutely epic, had the best serving staff. And, you know, frequently, you know, just think back and laugh. And thank goodness that was like an epic memory to kind of hold on to when the world went sideways.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments ever was that lunch.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of hard to top that.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a couple minutes about your latest book, which is Watch Out for Her. Can you give us an introduction to the story?
So Watch Out for Her is a psychological thriller / domestic suspense. And it is about a mother named Sarah Goldman, who has a young son named Jacob, who's almost 7 years old. And she's been a stay-at-home mom for his entire life. And when summer comes, she realizes that she's missing this piece of her identity, a piece of herself, and she decides she wants to return to her first love, which is photography. And so she hires a energetic, young, beautiful babysitter named Holly Monroe to take care of Jacob for the summer. And it seems like the most perfect arrangement. Jacob adores Holly, and Sarah and Holly form this instant bond. not like our instant bond.
Yeah, not to be confused with.
Which they form an instant bond because in Sarah, Holly finds the mother figure that she is desperately seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And in Holly, Sarah finds, you know, a representation of the youth that she never got to live. And so this one fascinates her. And as a photographer, Sarah is also a voyeur, not for sexual purposes,
Mm-hmm.
but she watches people to better understand who she is.
Mm-hmm.
But the relationship, they get too close, too fast. And Sarah ultimately sees something that she can't unsee.
Okay.
And she feels like her only choice is to flee where they live in Vancouver to an entirely new life in Toronto. And when they arrive at their new home, she finds hidden cameras all over this new house.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. When do you remember first getting like that little nugget of an idea for this story?
Oh gosh, and it was so long ago now. The book came out in 2022. And so, and I started writing it. It's interesting, before the pandemic, and then writing most of it during the pandemic. So the inspiration and the kernel of the idea, it all evolved because of, I think, the pandemic. I'm fascinated by watching and listening to people. Sarah uses her camera. I do not use a camera. I, though, do sometimes, if I'm walking my dog at night and, because it's dark, if somebody has their lights on and their curtains up, I can see inside their houses. And I'm always just so fascinated, not even by the people, but by the decor and how someone lays out their home. Because I don't have a really good sense of design. And so I think it started with just the idea first of watching people. Just when you watch someone and they don't know they're being watched, I love that idea because it's creepy. And then it was also the idea of identity. I have two kids that are now teenagers, and I was never only a stay-at-home mom. I was a work-at-home mom because for me it was vitally important to have my own separate identity as a writer. It has been for such a long time. So I really wanted to explore the idea of a woman who has ultimately given up so much of her own life to raise her children. I find it so admirable. And then, dun, 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 the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, my kids are home all the time. And all of a sudden, I am this person whose identity, I didn't know what my identity was. All I knew is my main priority was making sure my kids were okay.
Right.
And so everything kind of just sort of.
Yeah. There were no clear, hard boundaries or clear, hard lines. Everything kind of morphed and people worked together all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there was that. And then there was also the idea with Holly as a character, and Sarah too, that when we're trying so hard to hide who we really are, that we end up having secrets because we're trying so hard, because we're so afraid to be judged for who we really are.
Right.
That's where all the danger comes into play. And so this is, as a psychological thriller writer, is all very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because Holly at one point, kind of gets kicked out of her house and seeks a home with Sarah and her husband and her son, who she's watching, and is like dissolved into tears and saying, I just don't know who I am. And Sarah commenting to her, like, she's like twice her age, neither do I. It kind of comes and evolves with time. And I think it's something that we can all relate to. I think there's a universality to it that, who we thought we were at, 22, which is the age Holly is, and us, a couple of years past that, not many, how better a sense of self we all have.
Yes. And I will say, I turned 50 in May.
Yeah.
And it's true what they say, that all of a sudden you do get this sense of self in a way that I hadn't in this way before, where suddenly this feeling of, no, I mean, I still care what people think of me. Of course I do. And all of
Okay.
these things, but I care less. What I think of myself becomes more important.
Yeah. And I think we do a better job as we get older about who thinks what about us. Right. The people who
Yeah,
don't know us and don't know our story and don't know our experience, who are they to comment? Right. But the ones who are walking, side by side and understand where we've been and what we do, those are the people that we value. But I think you're right. That has to come from within first, without
totally.
a doubt.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's that whole, like, it's a psychological thriller. So what amazes me about your books is that touch of human behavior and why we do what we do, which is always so fascinating.
Thank you. I think that's why I also call it domestic suspense. Most of my books, or all my books to date, and my next one coming out, are focused on relationships. They tend to be very female centered, and very much about psychology. I love psychology. Had I not been an author, I would have been a psychologist, except for the whole statistics thing that I can't do.
Yeah, that's kind of a drawback.
It's why, yeah, it is a drawback. It's why I had to drop psychology as
But
a
where does that
plan.
come into play? Like statistics. I mean, unless you're looking to go on and publish studies, you would need to know statistics. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I've ever been to a counselor where they talk statistics.
Well, I think if when you're looking at, how many people on average maybe do this, and how many people who are diagnosed with something have these characteristics and these characteristics. I think because, whenever you're trying to put someone into a box, which
Right.
you can't help but do with psychology, can't help but do it with genres and books,
Yeah, I
like you
know.
need these boxes so that people, outsiders or even insiders, have an understanding of the elements within it.
Right. Or what to expect. Right.
Oh, what to expect. Exactly. And so I think that's where statistics really do, they come into play.
Can I ask you where, is your background, or where your research is in terms of some of the psychology things that we see in the book? Because nobody in your books has been, I want to say openly diagnosed, right? But yet there's still behavioral tendencies. And how do you get it just right that it strikes that tone?
They have been diagnosed, actually, I think. In all of them, at some point, someone has been diagnosed with something. Like Woman on the Edge,
Yes.
Nicole suffered from a panic disorder.
Right.
So I would say, like, in that sense.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
diagnoses that will come later. But I will say, so first, my own research. I read voraciously, and I have a master's in applied linguistics, and so a master's of education. So research is my jam. So do people still say it's my jam? Is that
They do know. They do now. Like, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Back.
So research, I love it. I love it so much. I do most of it incognito on my computer, but I love it. And I'm extremely lucky that a very good friend of mine is an excellent psychotherapist who allows me to ask him the most uncomfortable, strangest questions.
Right.
And I recently said to him, you don't bat an eye. And he's like, oh, I bat an eye. But because it's in messages, I don't see his face when I'm asking him these questions. And so I ask him a lot of questions. And then I take artistic license too.
Okay.
Because there is artistic license and, that I take. So all errors are my own or artistic license. But I'm very lucky to have somebody who I can speak to. And I also have friends, they are life coaches, and then other friends who are psychologists and therapists. So it's been just super helpful to have a team of experts on my side.
Absolutely. I think that that's one of the things they talk about why people read books, right? So they typically find people, are story driven. This is where your linguistics, like they, because of the love of language, how a book is written or where a book is set or character. And I find myself, I mean, you can be variations of them, but there's normally one way that people enter a book. And I find myself very character driven. And I think it speaks to the amount of research that you do so that the characters don't come across as flat, that they're complicated like we real human beings are, that we're not all good, not all bad.
That means so much to me because it takes so many rewrites to get there and revisions. It takes a lot of drafts for me to get from how I've outlined my characters to where they end up. It takes me a while to find out who are they really, what motivates them, what's at stake for them, how far will they go to get what they want. So, and I have to really, really think about them, and they become people. So they have to become people. When I first start writing, they are, in a sense, almost cardboard cutouts that I have to flesh out and add layers to. So that ultimately by the end, to me, they are absolutely real to the sense where, I'm speaking to them while walking down the street. And I'm like, yeah, well, and I'll make notes on voice recorder on my phone while I'm walking. I make notes wherever I go, and I'm thinking about them all the time. If I'm driving, I pull over to make a note. They're in my mind all the time. And then, as I get through draft after draft, ultimately I find who are they really?
Yeah, I think the whole writing process is fascinating. And obviously it takes you far longer to write than it takes us to read, right? Who stay up all night and say, okay, it's cereal for dinner. And thank goodness I did the laundry before I started this book, right? So, which is absolutely terrific. So you've written 2 books, you've written a third we'll talk about in a little bit. Do the characters stay with you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so, however, this is what I will say is when I have finished that very final edit, read, goes off to my publishers, the minute my book is published and available to everybody, I never read it again, unless I'm reading like a chapter here or there for events. I never read it again.
Really?
No. Because if I were to read it again, it would stress me out so much because then, with time and distance, I would go back and think, oh my God, I should have done this. I should have done that. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to look back with regret on anything. I just want to keep moving forward. So, once that book is out, it belongs to my readers and it's their experience. And then I write my next book. And so when I start, so the characters stay inside me. They're, like family, like friends, like enemies,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Frenemies. They're all of that.
Right.
But then I have to, fully focus, and I'm a method writer where I get really involved in my characters, and sometimes I have a hard time separating, who they are, that they're not real. I know that sounds really weird. So whenever I am writing a book, I'm all in on that book.
Right.
So it's funny. So even talking about Watch Out for Her while I'm working on my next one, now I'm in proofreads. It takes me a minute to go back and not talk about the characters that I'm living with right now.
Right. So then we're talking about Watch Out for Her right now. So this character's still kind of part of you, but the next book has kind of jumped the line, so to speak, right, to your time and your attention.
Exactly.
Gosh, I wonder, sometimes I wonder, you all writers who, imagine people as real. I don't know how else to say that, right? That like, do they ever talk to each other in your head? Like in Woman on the Edge, do they ever kind of go, oh, hey, I got to get in touch with Holly and watch out for her, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm a very visual writer. Some people are, I think auditory writers. I am a very visual writer.
Okay.
So I see the scenes play out, but I absolutely hear their dialogue. And yes, and I hear their narrative too. Yes, I
Okay.
have ongoing conversations between my characters. I'll lie in bed at night, and I always read before I go to bed. I can't sleep unless I read. So I'll read someone
Me
else's
too.
book.
Yeah. Same thing.
And I read while I'm writing, like read. So I'll read someone else's book, put it down, and I'll lie in bed. And then all of a sudden, my characters will start having a conversation. And it'll be characters, though, it'll be the book I'm working on, where dialogue that I need to flesh out, or I just, whatever I'm working on, I'll think about what conversation they're having. From that dialogue, one line will remain. So I may have pages of dialogue in my head. One line will remain.
Oh, it makes me admire writers all that much more when I see how much work goes into crafting a book. So I'm joined in conversation with award-winning Samantha M. Bailey, and this is her latest. Watch out for her. So let's talk a little bit about the writing process, right? And characters, and narrative. This book is told from 2 different points of view, and 2 different timelines.
Yeah.
So the question is, I think for me, how do you keep that all straight?
So it's really interesting. I don't have a really good sense of spatial orientation, direction. All of these things are not my forte.
Your jam.
So what I do, though, is I put it on Post-its.
Okay.
And lay out everything on Post-its on like a wall, so that I can figure out what's happening. Like if you say to me, "Oh, you can make an Excel spreadsheet," I can, but no. The minute I look at a spreadsheet, I panic and I think, "Oh God,
so sad." Spreadsheets make me so happy.
Right? You're a librarian, so your organization, your shelves.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Spreadsheets make me really just I get hives, and so I use Post-its.
Okay.
And then I keep track of a really strong outline. I always have to make sure I have a really strong, almost 20-page outline.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again. How many pages for an outline?
17 to 20.
Wow.
I'm contractually obligated to hand over an outline, so I have to do that anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, it helps because at least then I know
where
how
you're
to lay out.
going. Okay.
Where I'm going. It changes. It absolutely changes. I'll start writing. My characters will say,
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing that.
I'm not wearing that.
My teenagers, I'm not doing that. So then I have to change things. But also I will say an excellent editor. I have a critique partner who is much better at logic. My critique partner is rom-com author Meredith Shore.
Yep.
Yes,
Yay.
who is just also, one of my best friends in the whole world. Mm-hmm. She's really good at logic. She's also a trademark paralegal. And so she will point out when things aren't making sense, or if, I haven't taken something from the past forward into the present. And then my editing team, my editorial team, my agent, my editors, the copy editors, the proofreaders. It takes more than a village. It takes, I think, a whole city to make a book.
Yeah. It's amazing to me because when you're doing 2 different points of view and you're doing 2 different timelines, that you're not giving anything away because you are a thriller writer. So there comes twists, which is, and then they're not cheap twists by any means, but you're having to give enough away to keep people interested and engaged, and at the same time not completely give it away, which is always kind of magical. And to know that you do that from an outline and still manage to keep us on the edge of our seat is phenomenal. So.
Thank you. That is also revisions. That is revisions. Moving clues, twists, reveals from place to place, cutting things, putting until the, drop dead date of the last deadline, things are still being moved around to where hopefully it is the perfect spot.
And they typically say, because I believe writing is an art, that art is never done, it's simply abandoned, right? Because you will constantly tweak. You know, painters will look at the painting and constantly go, oh, that's not the right brushstroke, or I could have used a different color here. I should have highlighted that object, right?
Yes.
So,
I think the word abandoned, I find that.
yeah, I know that's a little bit strong.
Yeah,
So.
I think maybe you free yourself from it. So the way when it belongs to our readers, and if we don't look back at it, I mean, we look back at it if we don't read it again, or if we don't, ruminate over it too much, I think we freed ourselves. We've created our art. If we've chosen to put our art out into the world, and if we're lucky enough that somebody pays us to do that, and we're lucky enough that readers want it, and that we have an audience, then there comes a point, yes, where we free ourselves from that piece of art and we move on to the next piece of art.
Okay, so I will take back my word abandoned, but
no, it's because it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just because with art,
just a brave thing to do, because this in conversation with Samantha M. Bailey, watch out for her, is phenomenal, but at the same time, like it's done, it's finished, and then it goes into the hands of readers, and that you have absolutely no control over, right? Most of us are kind, right? Most of us,
my
read.
readers, yes.
Yeah. But then it becomes a very different book, because I can read it, my mom can read it, my book club can read it, and we all bring different experiences and backgrounds to it. Hopefully it's what you intended us to walk away with, but it's always a very interesting and brave thing, right? Because it's open for feedback.
It is the only time in my life I feel like I truly take risks.
Yeah.
Well, you know this about me. I'm fearful. I don't like roller coasters. I don't like walking too quickly for fear of tripping, and
That's something I typically do.
cracking my head open. So do I.
Right.
I trip, but I'm fearful of getting hurt. And so I don't take a lot of risks, but in my writing life, I take all the risks. And maybe because this was a dream that I had for so long that I almost don't fully believe that it's real. So if it doesn't feel totally real, then the risk doesn't feel maybe as scary, or I don't know, or I figure I have nothing to lose because I wanted this for so long.
Right.
I got it. I better.
And you're crushing it. I will say #1 instant bestseller. Like instant means immediate. Instant isn't like, oh yeah, #1, 52 weeks later bestseller. Instant bestseller.
Oh, and I want to go back and just say something. I don't want to correct you, but I'm not an award winner. So no one's ever handed me an award.
I'll give you an award.
But I'm a bestseller, but not an award winner, which is fine. That's all, listen, it's all, and there's goals to work toward, and it's, everyone has different goalposts for different moments, and it's all good. I'm so grateful. It's surreal. It's surreal. I worked for 20 years. It took 20 years. I was 29 when I wrote my first full-length novel. Signed with an agent really quickly. It's not the agent I have now. Wonderful agent, big New York City agent. Thought, yes, 29 years old, I'm gonna crush it in New York City. I was crushed instead by rejection after rejection and rejection. Anyway, it took 5. Woman on the Edge is the 5th book that I had written. My incredible visions together. She, by my side, helped me tear that book apart and rebuild it. And then it sold. And then, everything I wanted happened.
Yeah. And you've worked hard, and your background, can we tell people your background as an instructor and editor? I mean, you've been around writing your whole life, right? You've always known you wanted to write.
Yes, because we're so close. When you said background, I was like, Jen, what are we going to talk about?
Professional hats are on. We're good.
Yeah, I I'm on hiatus. I've been on hiatus since Woman on the Edge came out, but I was or am a freelance editor for authors. So I edited other people's manuscripts. And that taught me so much, not only about writing and not only about structure, but how to take critiques. Because if I'm going to dish it out, then I better take it. And I love taking it.
Well, that I would say that you're in the minority with that. When I just had to go to a workshop last week where it was about coaching and feedback. And as a manager, this is something that we do. But I kind of said in my, evaluation, like it'd be nice to have a complimentary session that tells people this is how you should receive feedback so that things move, in the right direction, because nobody wants to hear that they, could do something better. Everybody is essentially trying to do the best they can. And when somebody says, not quite good enough, it's hard to hear. So the fact that you love that.
I'm a masochist with my work, but also I think because I know it's a draft, and I think if you accept, so it's very different. It depends what field you're in. If you're doing surgery,
it's not a draft.
That's not a draft. And if someone says, you could have done better, right? Like that's a very different thing. So if you're working on a book and you know that this is a draft, and you have that in your mind that it's a draft, first draft, whatever it is, then perhaps you will welcome the feedback, because from that first draft, it will transform into something you can be so proud of. And when that book goes out into the world, I want it to be the very best book that I can write. And I can't do that alone.
Right.
Because I don't often even see what is actually on the page as opposed to what's in my mind. And I know that it needs work, and it needs the work of experts, and it needs the work of people I trust. So I have so much respect for my editors. I value their opinions. No one's trying to change my voice. No one's trying to change my vision for the story.
Right.
All that's happening is everyone is just trying. We're all just trying to develop these characters to their fullest potential, to make sure that everything is logical and as authentic as possible, and that everything makes sense, that things aren't pulling the reader out of the story.
Right.
All the darlings are killed. We have a lot of darlings. And I don't, sometimes there are lines where I'm like, I thought that was really good. And, someone will say, meh.
Yeah.
But it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. And I love the process of watching something go almost from nothing into something.
Absolutely. And I think, the job of your trusted, editors and support are basically trying to take what's in your head and make sure that it appears on the page so the reader has that same connection. So, and sometimes we're too close to something. I think no matter what we do, sometimes it takes, an outside perspective. It's why I switched careers. Because I was too close to something for somebody to be like, you're a librarian. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense now. Right.
Yeah. It's hard to take that step back and look at something from a different perspective until someone points it out.
And then once they do, and you start moving, and yes, it's work to get to that point. To your point, you're so proud of it, right? And it's so valuable because everything that went in to making that possible. And I never take what I do for granted. I'm so lucky. I wish I would have discovered this sooner, but as my mom would say, you can't unring the bell. So, yeah.
And I think everything is, as cheesy as this sounds, as it's supposed to be, that I think it was supposed to take me 20 years, that maybe I needed to be older, wiser, I don't know, but maybe I needed to be older and I would appreciate it more. Maybe my skin got a little, tougher and thicker. When I was younger, perhaps I would have taken things differently. I don't know. I just think it is all as it's supposed to be, and that every step that we take to get to here today, because who knows where tomorrow is going to be, that, meant something. All the books that I wrote before that.
Well,
No
where
big
are those? You said that Woman on the Edge, which I know is your first book, is actually your fifth book. So where did the other four live?
They live in my basement with, I don't know, probably people in all the clutter. My basement is so
Let's
not talk about our basements. It's so messy. Sorry. They live in my basement, and they live in my heart, but they live in my basement, and no wasted words. I don't regret writing any of those books because they got me here.
Absolutely. So I'm joining conversation with Samantha Bailey. Latest book is Watch Out for Her. So I have to talk a little bit about the fact that you reference one of my favorite movies in this book. That every time it comes on, you have to watch just a little bit of it, which is Pretty Woman. And so Holly is talking, and she's thinking about some of the decisions that she's made, in the course of her life, what she thinks she should be doing, for the good of the business. And she comments on Vivian in Pretty Woman and says, Vivian sold her body for money, but she did it on her own terms, and she had agency. So I think there's something universal. I mean, I know I've said that before, but something that's in common. Like when we do something on our own terms, it's a completely different thing than we're doing something because people want us to do, or we think we should be doing. So.
Yeah, 100%. When we have agency of our own lives, while that is hard because then, I guess we blame ourselves if things don't go well, or, or especially if you're a type A person, you're always trying to control it so that nothing goes wrong. But of course, things will always go wrong, and you cannot control everything. With writing, all you can control really is the writing. That's it. That's all you can control is the writing, because everything else is so much out of our control. Having that agency is incredible. Having that agency means we're adults, and that's also a hard pill to swallow too. That we're adults and we're in charge.
Yeah. Sometimes I would say it's a double-edged sword. There are days where I'm like, oh my God, I was in a hurry to do this. Really?
I think all writers, especially during our launch week, especially that very first launch week. So suddenly you have these unbelievable highs, like these dopamine highs. Your book is on a shelf. You dream of it. You go to the bookstore, you go to the library, and there's your book. And it's like a feeling that I can't explain. I mean, it is a saw up on your knees type of feeling.
Okay.
And then things are so busy, and you're so busy, and you're doing all these things, but you have expectations. And I've learned to have now no expectations, just expect the unexpected, because you have expectations, because we all want New York Times bestseller, movie deal, to see someone on the subway reading our book, whatever it is. We all have our own dreams and ideas of what this will be like.
Right.
On social media, we see things there, and even when people see like #1 bestseller, yes, it is. It'll make me emotional. It is beyond. Never did I ever think that would happen. So that's so surreal. But then at the same time, suddenly, launch week, everything is quiet. And all that attention that was on you, moves to the next book. And suddenly you're like, now what? Oh, I have to write the next book. That's the only thing I can control. But you're like, oh no, but I have to make sure I'm promoting, and I have to make sure people see me and they know who I am. And it's all very, it's a high pressure situation. And it's a desperate situation that we're in, because it can be a very fleeting career. It's unstable. So we are so grateful. We're so grateful. We know how lucky we are, authors, to be here. But it's not an easy thing. There is a little bit of be careful what you wish for moments in there when yeah, you're working 14 hours a day on a deadline,
Mhm.
sucking back like 17 coffees. Like there is with anything,
Right.
anything has its highs and its lows.
Well, I find it interesting. How do you structure your day then? Because right now, you're talking about this book, you have another book coming out. You are like on social media, have such a presence there to be authentic and genuine and supportive of your fellow colleagues who are writers. So, I mean, how much of your day is spent doing social media and responding? Because you're not just posting, you
Too
respond to
much.
people too.
Like, social media is I love people. Connecting with
Mhm.
people is vital. It's vital to my well-being. And so social media, well, definitely I'm on it too much. And perhaps, I do have to make sure, like I have to hide my phone so that I stop looking at it, because it is addictive. It is, you're talking to all these people and you're connecting with people, and these amazing, deep, wonderful conversations, or the laughter. And it was another pandemic thing where we connected and
Mhm.
we created these beautiful communities. And they're now so important to me that I want to talk to people. And there are
Mhm.
people I talk to every day. And so I tend to get up very early. I get up around 5, although my summer hours have been a little more
You like 6:30. Woo,
6:30,
sleeping
6:30
in.
this morning. Yeah. So my summer hours are a little bit later, but I say 5 a.m.
Mhm.
And then I write. I don't do usually any social media early in the morning. I write or edit or whatever it is I'm working on. I'm,
Type
sketching
or write?
type.
Type or
I
voice?
sometimes I actually use my voice on my document.
Okay.
So sometimes I record, dictate. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, use my voice.
Like I said, turned 50, and all of a sudden, it's like, what are words? Um,
Yes,
yeah, so I'll
linguistics. Mhm.
dictate sometimes. I'll write by hand if I take my notebook with me somewhere. Like I go for a walk, or I go on a hike, or I go to the beach, or I am out. But I also tend to send myself draft emails. I'll just draft out different emails instead, because they're a lot easier to copy and paste over.
Yes.
Yeah. But until about 8, I do that. And then, my kids, whatever, I'm getting up, and it's, breakfast and just dealing with all my kids' stuff. And then once the kids are sort of doing whatever they're doing, I'll go back.
Mhm.
And then I'll usually do my social media and my messages and all of that. And then I'll write again. So I tend to intersperse it. It's probably not the most efficient.
What
um,
works for you? Number one instant bestseller.
well,
Thanks.
I think I may not have to work so many hours in a day if I structured it a little differently. There are authors who write only. I
Mhm.
had a conversation years ago with JT Ellison and Lisa Unger, who,
Lisa Unger. Yeah, just
yeah,
saw her last week. Yeah.
they're both so
Yeah,
lovely.
JT's on my bucket list.
Oh
I'll
yeah,
tell her.
and they have been so I've been lucky enough to have lunch with Lisa and to
Yeah.
be on Lisa's things and to talk to JT. And we had it was I think at the very beginning of the pandemic, and they were talking about how I don't know if they still do this, structure their day,
Mhm.
where yeah, they separate it, they
Absolutely.
protect their work.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Lisa talks about the shallows. Like she read Cal Newport's book and like
Yes.
considered social media the shallows and a distraction. So she's very deliberate with where she writes and what's on. And like, I guess the whatever computer she's typing on is not connected to the internet. So she's not distracted, and a very specific space that she writes in. So
Yes. Yeah. I think with this next book, my third book comes out early 2024. My fourth book, I think, is 2025. So that one I'm actually just working on the outline now. I think I may do that. I may see what is the process like if I switch it up a little bit
mhm.
and devote solely just to the writing, and then social media at a dedicated time. But it's a strong pull.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt. And there's been research about how it impacts your brain, very similar to addiction. Tristan Harris does this amazing TED Talk, and I'm fascinated by the area of the brain that lights up when we're on. So, but
Yeah,
it also is a true sense of connection. I mean, we've kept in touch the last several years because of it. So,
yeah, we became close, through all our online messages, right? It's all these online messages, and which is so much actually about my next book. That's a whole other topic, but that's that connection with people, and that feeling of camaraderie and that feeling of being seen. I have the most amazing friends in real life. So I do see people. I leave my house and I love to go out to see my
it's like
friends.
the disclaimer: no, I'm not a recluse. Next online.
And my family, but this online world it's a very unique little spot.
Absolutely, it is. We're joined in conversation this evening with Samantha Bailey of Watch Out for Her. It just made me think about that sense of camaraderie and that sense of connection and how well we really know people. And that comes up in this book as well, is that we think we know somebody. And even though you're in the same house as them or they're babysitting your kids, you truly, truly know them.
I think it's a running theme in all my books.
Yeah.
Is how well we know people, how much we can actually trust that someone has our best interests at heart, that we can take what people say at face value. I mean, all of these things that I think fascinates me. Sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, all of those types of people I find really intriguing. And I also find flawed characters. Give me an unlikable woman over a likable woman any day as a reader, please.
Yeah. It's so funny because I just picked up a book like 2 weeks ago about unlikable female characters and why we like them. That's like the title of the book. And I was like, I saw it and I was like, oh, I have to read this, right? I mean, why we're drawn to that. And I think it's because, I don't know, does it make us feel a little bit better about our choices, or is it we can understand why people would do what they do? I'm not.
I think it's a sense of voyeurism. Like I do think it's a sense of voyeurism. I think reading is a sense of voyeurism, where we're watching these people's lives unfold and all the danger and the lies and secrets and the murder. Like it's just it's being a fly on the wall without getting hurt ourselves. I think it teaches us. I think it teaches us maybe things about ourselves that we don't necessarily like, that we might want to work on. Maybe things that you suddenly recognize in people that you never let yourself recognize before because you were afraid to let them go. So I think there's so much in what makes somebody likable, unlikable, especially women. I love flawed anybody in real life too. I don't want
that's why you love me.
No, stop it. I don't want like perfect, pristine, do nothing wrong friends, because I'll feel awful. And I want real. I want people who have, the scars and bruises from life, who, yes, of course, we've all been through trauma and difficult times, and we're still here, and how we manage that and work through it and become stronger, and what we learn from all of those past experiences. That, I think, is what makes a person interesting.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we go through stuff just so that if somebody else goes through it, they're seen, right, and heard, and not alone. So
sorry, you froze on that probably very astute sentence, so I heard nothing you just
said.
Yeah,
this is very astute. Yeah, because I just was saying that I think sometimes we go through hard stuff And it's helpful because somebody else will go through something similar and then they feel seen and heard, right? And know that they're not alone on that, temporary struggle.
Yes. It's so true. So much of this
So
book.
astute, right?
Hmm? It was no,
So
it's
darn
so
astute.
true. It is,
Yeah.
it is astute, and it's so spot on, because that's so much of what Watch Out for Her is about, is lack of communication.
Right.
And people can say, oh, well, a married couple, why don't they just talk about it? It's not that easy for a lot of people to just talk about it.
Right.
Depending on whatever it is. With Sarah and Daniel, they're
Mm-hmm.
both hiding things
Right.
from each other because they're so afraid to be seen differently by the other.
Right.
And they can't bring themselves to do it. Even for Sarah to admit that she wanted to go back to photography, she felt so much guilt over not wanting to just be with her son. There's so much guilt. And in motherhood, there's so much guilt. And there's so much that we don't talk about.
Right.
Because we're trying so hard to be strong and perfect.
Right. And that's what she really struggles with, about trying to find some sense of genuine connection. I kind of wrote it down as a question, but we're already talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that might be true, for a lot of us. That sense of self makes me think of Brene Brown, who's like one of my all-time favorite people. Where she talks about belonging versus fitting in, right? And this is what came up for me while I was reading Watch Out for Her, is that fitting in is basically being who people expect you to be. And belonging is like just being your authentic self and being comfortable with that. And how infrequently we belong, I should say. I mean, I don't want to be like doom and gloom, but that's typically where a lot of tension and stuff arises from, because people aren't as honest.
Well, that's where a lot of self-esteem issues arise from. And I think that's why the book community is so important, and such a warm, welcoming place. And I'm going to say that the thriller community, especially, is this amazing space where I feel like I belong, probably more than I belong anywhere else in my life, because we see each other, we get each other, we support each other, we want the best for each other.
Absolutely.
We're all weird. So it's
everybody's weird.
Everyone's weird, but we all have really dark thoughts, and really, so we appreciate that in each other. For us, that's beautiful.
And to those listening and watching, I will say that's true. Having gone to BoucherCon, it's like they're reuniting after band camp. Like, a genuine sense of camaraderie. I mean, the fact that you're like, oh yeah, Lisa and JT. Meanwhile, like Lisa, I've gotten to know, but like JT, I'm like, one day, I remember meeting her like ever so briefly. But I say that to say that you're genuinely happy for one another, that you'll sit on panels, and if somebody's book sells, not everybody's book, that's okay, because you were friends, that person, that reader who bought one book will eventually go and find the others. And at the same time, you have these diabolically dark minds. So
it's so true. I mean, there's space for us all. There is space for us all. And even if it's not, someone's time today, it could be someone's time tomorrow. And we are there to celebrate when it is someone's time, and to help each other get there. It is
it's one of the coolest things to like just kind of witness. You talk about observing and just kind of being able to sit back and watch you all talk to one another and be so genuinely happy to see people succeed. And, at the same time to pick them up when they're, they've written themselves into a corner, and what do they do, and to bounce ideas off of. Yeah.
Yeah. Because this publishing is not for the faint of heart. It is not easy. And we need to be there for each other, for all the ups and the downs and the, rejections, because no matter how successful anyone is, we all get rejected, and it will happen again, and it will happen again. I don't think that ever stops. I don't think it stops for any artist. I don't think any artist is like, getting every single project that they want,
Yeah.
or, and you learn to deal with it, and you learn to accept it, and you learn to just keep going. And that
Right.
is true when you talk to each other and you commiserate. And yeah, it's everything. I was just at Thriller Fest in New York in May. Feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
And it was, it's so wild. BoucherCon, Thriller Fest. It's such a fast-paced rush of talking for 2 seconds to all these different people. But just to see people again, and to hug them, to finally hug them, to go for a drink, to have dinner. Oh my God, there was this beautiful dinner that Danielle Gerard organized one night with, like, I think there were 30 of us there. There were all different tables.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. It was awesome. I sat next to Julia Bartz, who I'd never met before. The writing retreat. Yes. Oh my God.
I was going to say, I've never, never met her.
Yeah.
Read her, never met her. Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but I really want to. So lovely. And so something like that, where there's someone I wanted to meet and I was really excited to meet, and we just spent an entire dinner talking, and it was awesome.
Can you tease us about your next book?
So my
early
next
2024.
Yes, my next book is called A Friend in the Dark. It is out early 2024 with Thomas and Mercer, which is an imprint of Amazon Publishing. In a nutshell, it is about a woman named Eden, whose husband has just left her at the same time her daughter starts college. And on her 45th birthday, when she's all alone at home, something prompts her to reconnect with her college crush, and it sparks a torrid online relationship that may put her life and the lives of her family in danger.
Wow. Psychological, domestic thriller. Yeah.
That I have pitched it. It's the first time I've done that.
Oh, you did great. I mean, it could be called whatever. As long as I see Samantha M. Bailey, I will definitely pick it up and read it. So as we're wrapping up, this series is supporting Cleveland Reads, which is about literacy in the Cleveland community. Can you talk about why literacy and reading is important to you?
Oh my gosh. I grew up surrounded by books. My parents, walls and walls and walls of books, and they let me read whatever I wanted. And I do the same with my kids. And first of all, I think reading is such an escape. When I was younger, I was bullied a fair bit. I am really small. I'm 5 feet tall with my hair up. And as a kid, I was always the smallest. And I don't know if that made me an easy target or just that I felt small. And so through reading, I found my voice. And then it ultimately led me to becoming a writer. It was because I was such a voracious reader, and I'd escape into Judy Blume.
Yes.
Judy Blume is how we all got through our childhoods. And then ultimately I don't want to say blossomed because it sounds, but I found my voice and
your sense of self. Yeah.
I found my sense of self. Yeah. By the time I went to high school, I found my sense of self. And I also used to work in a literacy program. I taught adults who needed to learn to read. It was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done.
I agree.
Every single adult who came was so ashamed. And all I wanted to do was take away their shame, because it doesn't matter when you start reading. Of course, everyone wants to start as a child, but not everyone has that opportunity.
Right.
Yeah. So literacy for me, just providing books, all books, All books.
All books. Yes.
All books on the shelves, inclusive books on the
Yes.
shelves. Yes.
Exactly
Um,
right.
yes, I think it changes the world. It makes the
Mhm.
world a better place, and it makes people stronger inside.
Absolutely. So the final 5 questions, right? You are a huge fan of grunge music. It's the best concert you ever went to.
Oh, okay. So in Toronto, maybe
Mhm.
all of Canada, back in the 90s, I think it was it the 90s? Yeah, probably the 90s. Edgefest, where it was like a full, like all day, all night concert. It was, I saw Nine Inch Nails, Jane's Addiction, Soundgarden.
Oh, no way.
Oh yeah, it's like Lollapalooza,
Yes,
uh, but
but
smaller, I
bigger.
guess, because we also
Yeah.
had Canadian bands. We had, I think the Watchmen were there, it's one of my favorite bands of all time. I think Our Lady Peace was there.
Oh,
You know Our Lady
of
Peace?
course I know Our Lady
Oh,
Peace.
yay!
Yeah, Nine Inch Nails I used to listen to before every soccer game.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and Chris Cornell is anyway.
yes. Mhm.
So there you go. So that was it. It was, I don't remember the year, but
Mhm. Okay. What's the best thing about being a writer?
there's so many, honestly.
Mhm.
I would
One
say
of the best. Yeah.
ultimately the best thing about being a writer is making other people feel something, I think.
It's
I
awesome.
think, yeah, beyond what it gives to me personally,
Mhm.
which is again a sense of self and my own identity and therapy and an escape and
Yeah.
just such
Yeah, I
fulfillment.
feel like I need to schedule a therapy session with you when we're done.
I'm here anytime. And I'll write it in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a statistical thing. I don't know that I can, but
Yeah, just I guess making people feel.
do you have a favorite book that you read again and again and again? Or because you're so busy, you don't read?
Oh, well, I do. I'm so lucky. I get books to blurb for other authors. So I do.
Mhm.
That's most of my reading at the moment. But a book that I read again and again and again, right there, God, It's Me, Margaret would be one.
Mhm.
Forever by Judy Blume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great documentary about her if you
I
haven't seen it.
watched it. I watched the movie. I watched the documentary. I love that
Yeah,
documentary.
I saw her a couple years ago. She came through Cleveland and I was like, holy cow. And she owns this bookstore in Key West and she works
Yes.
all the time.
Yeah. I saw her in
So,
Toronto years ago.
so cool.
Oh, she's an icon, a legend.
I think
She's
she kind
an
of
inspiration.
hallmarked young adult literature because before, as a kid, I mean, you basically read children's stuff. You read Judy Blume, which was like a series of like probably 5 books that were YA. I mean, a lot of them were kids. And then you went right to the adult section. And now, like teenagers and young adults have it so good. There's
Oh,
so
I
much for
know.
them to read, to be
Yes.
seen. Yeah.
Yeah, but we grew up with her, right? Like we grew up
Yes.
getting to read these.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as we were going through that, she is the very epitome of being your own woman.
Yeah, absolutely. What writer would you consider writing a book with?
Macabre.
Huh. I kind
Easy
of
to
guessed
say because
what I
we
was
talk
thinking.
about it all the time. Macabre wrote The Hunting Wives,
Yes.
A Likeable Woman, and My Summer Darlings. Yes,
Yes.
May is one of my very, 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 very best friends, my soul sister. And Mare of the Shore. I actually think the three of us could do
Ooh.
like a funny, I have ideas. I have so many ideas.
Ooh. Cannot wait. And then, because I know you a little bit, what show right now is binge worthy and should be at the top of all of our queues?
Oh, what did I? Oh, the other two. Oh my God, it's so funny. I laughed so hard. I binged 4 seasons. It's
Okay.
about this brother and sister of this like 13-year-old who got discovered on YouTube and becomes this massive pop star, and then the whole family gets involved. It is so irreverent. It is so it
it's
can
so
be
it's
so
so Sam.
crass. It can be
Yeah.
so deliciously crass. It is hilarious, and it is a satire of celebrity
Yes.
And like but also like it's a real look at celebrity. It's just so well done.
Well, I want to say thank you again to Samantha M. Bailey for joining us this evening. Thank you to our tech team, a la Mike, making sure everything went smoothly this evening. And thanks to all of you who are watching and listening to Writers Unplugged and sharing your love of reading with each other. I'm Jen Jumba with the Cleveland Public Library. Thank you so much and happy reading.